While we wait for Joe to join us, I'll just go ahead and welcome everybody to this session. Thank you for joining us. We're going to be talking mostly about the crisis in Africa, all of the situations that have been swept under the carpet, underreported issues. We will be looking at that. And I'd like to start by introducing myself. I'm Mariana Cole. I'm a broadcast journalist at News Central TV. And we know that for so many years, Africa has been dubbed the dark continent, and that's not necessarily about the color of our skin or racial profiling. It's because of the stories that have been emanating from Africa. It's about how Africa has been perceived over the years. And now it looks more like Africa has had it. We're ready to tell our own stories. We're no longer waiting for the Western or the Europeans to tell our story or tell us how to tell it. We want to tell our stories. We want to change the narrative, and this is why we're having conversations such as this.
I found it very interesting, usually in West Africa, the narrative of that. Then beside that, after the narrative of the conflict, is actually also for people to feel that they can do something about it, because I truly believe the conflict can end, and opening up that conversation for people to know that there is something that can be done to end the conflict is very important.
Walk us through what you have done over the years to get people to understand, apart from the fact that you have this conversation with West Africans, what have you done to get people to understand the gravity of what's going on in Congo and getting them to get involved, at least to speak up? Because I know that you must have faced challenges, so we want to understand this. Walk us through it.
First, I became a refugee when the Second War in Congo started in 1998. My family had to flee. We were fortunate enough to end up in the United States. So I grew up in the United States as a refugee. But I was lucky enough to go to an HBCU, North Carolina A&T State University. And while there, while speaking to friends, it became clear that I needed to share the story of what was happening in my country. Yes, we can celebrate African culture, who we are as a people, what we have strived for to become independent countries, but we still have a scar on the human conscience and the conflict in the Congo. So I became engaged on my campus as a student back then, organizing with African Student Association and then the larger population. And then in 2008, it clicked. It clicked that there was nothing else I could do beyond making sure that the conflict ended. The reason why it clicked in my head was I left the Congo in 1998. 2008 was 10 years after. A decade later after I left the Congo, there was still conflict. There were still people being hurt. So I joined Friends of the Congo then, became the spokesperson of Friends of the Congo, mobilizing and organizing the students from pretty much around the world. We built a campaign called Breaking the Silence, Congo Week, where every third week of October, people around the world organize activities to raise awareness around the situation. So far, we have over 60 countries and over 600 universities around the world who participate in Congo Week. And I shared it with everyone I could speak with, that Nigerians showed me what Pan-Africanism is. They were dealing with issues in the country around police brutality. They rose up. In the middle of rising up, they start bringing up issues of Africa. They start bringing up issues of the Congo. They start bringing up issues of Mali. They start bringing issues of Malawi as well, right? And it became a larger discussion beyond police brutality about the situation on the African continent.
Why is it so difficult for even the media within the Congo to report, even if not exactly what's happening, but a little bit of coverage of what's happening in Congo?
Specifically speaking around the hashtag, you have to understand Congo's context. Less than 5% of the Congolese population has access to the internet. Right? So it will be even hard for them to tweet that. And of course, as you see, Congo is bleeding is a hashtag in English. Congo is a Francophone country that was really led not just by Congolese. I will remind people it was led by Nigerians as well to lift up that story. So that's one aspect about why within the Congo, an English hashtag in a country that has less access to the internet, for the vast majority of the people will not spread. The second one specifically around the media and the movement on the ground. Congolese have been mobilizing and organizing. I mean, when I'm saying 6 million deaths, they're not dying because they're just sitting there. They're resisting. They are facing militia groups and brutal forces that they are outgunned, and they are now of the essence of the violence against them. And for media, I mean, I was just share one thing that happened yesterday. There is a Congolese woman by the name of Chala Mwanda. She's she has a lot of songs that many Africans have probably have listened to. She was arrested yesterday. The reason why she was arrested yesterday is because she made a song that the current regime feels that she was speaking about the Congolese president, even though the official statement of the police is not saying that that's the reason why she was arrested. This is something that happened to an artist who just spoke up. What are other artists across the African continent saying about those who speak up or will get arrested? And we have many names of Congolese who have died resisting. So the point in the struggle of the Congolese, in terms of them rising up, it's not that they are not rising up, it's that we don't have their stories. They're mobilizing in the Francophone world, and we are not connected organically to the stories as we were back when we were fighting against apartheid. When we stopped apartheid, every African was clear about what was happening in South Africa. Now with the DRC, that's the hope that we want to have, that Africans understand that the Congo movement of today is as important as the Free South Africa movement was yesterday. And as they are organizing and mobilizing, we're lifting up their stories, because every day there is a story of resistance in the Congo, but unfortunately they're living under an oppressive regime, and they're also facing brutal forces such as militia groups, corporations getting access to resources, and so on.
All right. I would just like to let everyone who's watching know that Joe Wakokusi just joined us. He is, let me quickly his designation. He is a filmmaker, and his works have been marked with themes that have explored things that the mainstream media in Ghana is on. Joe Wako, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
All right, so let's come back to the also very peculiar. Now, we also know that the taxes have been ongoing, especially the Anglophone crisis. I remember sometime ago during the elections, still in certain regions of the Anglophone area of Cameroon, they were saying that they were not going to go to the polls because they felt that there was some disparity. But for those who hardly understand what's happening in Cameroon, please picture for us.
Sorry, I didn't hear that clearly.
Oh dear, I'll take that again. Paint a picture of what's happening in Cameroon for us.
Okay, so what's happening in Cameroon is that there is an age-long battle for identity that has been going on since the 60s. After the end of the Civil War, Germany had to give up some of its colonies around the world. And what happened was that Cameroon was split. One part went to the French and another part went to the British. Then there was a plebiscite, and the English side decided to stay with the northern Cameroons, which is the Francophone side. So since then, what has happened is that because the Anglophone-speaking regions are just 2 out of 10, what has happened is that there has been some sort of marginalization, almost constitutionalized, where people are treated based on the identity of their oppressor rather than the common roots of them all being Cameroonian. So you have, if you commit a crime, for example, in southwest Cameroon, you'll be taken to the capital, Yaoundé, to be tried under French law. Some of the schools, there was the struggle to have schools in the English region also undergo instruction, their language of instruction being French. So what you have is 2 countries living as one, right? But it's fragile harmony. And what has happened is that since 2016, some people, some annoyed, disgruntled elements within the Anglophone regions have decided to stand up for their rights, to ask for secession, to ask that President Biya recognize their rights. And of course, the army has responded the way the army has responded to the governments around Africa respond, trying to ensure regime security instead of national security. And so to unleash the army on people, there have been deaths. And essentially, those two English-speaking regions of Cameroon are war zones. You have many refugees who have come into Nigeria, into Benue State, into Taraba, and most especially into Cross River State. They are hiding there because even to go across the border, you have the gendarmerie. They're shooting at people for any excuse, right? So that's the situation there. There's just a targeted attack against the Anglophone people.
And what has been the response of, we know that Cameroon was once colonized by the French. What has France's response been in the handling of this issue? Because as we speak, there's so many, like you said, refugees. I come to Africa and I know how many have received so far. The government of that state is crying out about how many refugees they have to take care of, taking babies. What are world powers or like the ECOWAS? What are they doing? And you as a person who's talking to this story have to be able to get attention aside from within Africa, but outside Africa.
So in my experience reporting across West and briefly parts of Central Africa, I've seen that when an issue isn't happening in an Anglophone country, most of the media neglects to report it. France, on the one hand, has retained some sort of stronghold over many of these Francophone countries, even if not directly in the running and administration, but foreign policy. Look at Cote d'Ivoire, look at Cameroon, look at Guinea, right? If France turns its back on commenting or complaining about issues that are happening there, what has happened is that even though these bodies normally don't intervene, strongly in continental issues, when it is a Francophone or Lusophone issue, the silence is even more deafening. So that's what's happening.
It pains me to ask this next question, but I have to. What is the fate of the Anglophone or these regions in Cameroon who are dying every day or have to run away to seek refuge? What's the fate of these people? How many more people have to die for something to be eaten or some form of compromise to happen?
I honestly, and this is sad to say, honestly do not see a resolution of that crisis very soon, because the Cameroonian president, for one, who has been in the presidency before I was born. He has not. He addresses Cameroonians, I think, 2 or 3 times a year on Independence Day. He's not on ground. He's physically aged. Half the time he's in Switzerland. So there's no, and you have the Senate, which a large part is picked constitutionally by the president. So there's no government willpower, first of all, to tackle the crisis. In fact, I don't think that the presidency sees a crisis. They probably see insurrection and secession from a marginalized region. And it also happens that these Anglophone regions are the oil-producing regions of Cameroon. So the government is not going to let go of the goose that lays the goose that lays the golden egg. And of course, you'd expect that Cameroon's allies, France in particular, would also not support the disentanglement of that region. And of course, we on the continent don't matter as much, and that's why you have someone covering. I'm in New York right now, and I've met a lot of Africa correspondents or Africanists, as they call themselves, and you see people covering an entire continent from New York. It is very problematic, or devoting resources, maybe like sending recent college graduates to cover the continent, right? It's because he who pays the piper dictates the tune. And so, of course, you don't expect, on the one hand, you can justify it, right? That, of course, if the American media enterprise, holds the carrot and the stick, then it can decide what it wants to send, what it wants to allocate to the continent. But you also wonder if that's such a rounded worldview as the claim. And that's what I see. Of course, you have to realize that local media in Nigeria, for example, First, they're too preoccupied with covering all South Africa, too preoccupied with covering their local domestic affairs, to stretch their coverage to other countries. And then, of course, there's also the thing of funding on the continent. There's a sort of constipation with respect to the funding mechanism of media on the continent, whether in Anglophone or Francophone countries. And that's, for me, that's all of this contributes to the reason why there's a large silence on issues in individual countries. I mean, if you read American papers or British papers, for example, you would think Rwanda was a paradise. I mean, it has managed to develop a way forward, right, from its very, very past.
All right, apologies. I hope you guys can see and hear me now. I think that was my internet.
It's much better now.
Just let me know if you can see or hear me. I cannot see you guys, but I just want to know if you can see or.
Yeah, we can see. I can see. I don't know about.
I can.
Kambali, can you?
Can anybody hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I can hear you. Sorry about that. I couldn't hear the question.
Let's start with the fact that you're a content creator. You have created videos that highlighted issues on trafficking in women and children, especially, which in turn stirs conversations. I'd like to find out from you, all of these videos that you posted, what's the reception like? How receptive have people been towards the stories that you have been publishing, the films, the short movies that you have put out there to highlight the issues that are going on in Ghana?
I mean, thank you very much. First of all, for me, I see myself as a storyteller before anything else follows. So I just go out there to look for the stories that no one is telling. Okay, what are the stories the media is telling?
I cannot hear anybody.
Hi, can you hear me? Can you two hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, so for me, I just go out there to try and figure out what that you've been alive or for all your life, like the subjects in TV, the subjects in our films, the subjects in our songs have remained constant. And then it makes you wonder, are there no other people outside of this bracket or outside of these very subjects? So for me, first of all, I just try to look around to tell a story that a lot of people can really relate to and resonate with. I want to be able to walk down the street in Accra and bump into a character I wrote about. I want people to be able to watch my films and then are able to relate to about 3 or 4 characters. You know, someone who is a character in whichever story that you really see from me, and it's been very, very receptive so far. Especially, you do realize that once you start talking about the subject, a lot of people keep coming out, and you do realize you exactly are not really alone, or you really do not experience this alone. And thanks to social media has been able to pull like everything together, especially Twitter, where you get to curate your experiences, or you get to curate, or you get to talk on subjects that really interest you, where you get to know who you are letting into your space, who you are letting into your timeline. Then you end up realizing there is a bigger picture out there, and there's a bigger world out there, and there are like different stories that are really waiting to be told, because every single person out there is able to relate to something you are really talking about. Are you there, Mariam? Oh.
I think
I really think we just need to have a conversation. So like, if any question from any of you, or we could just have a really cool conversation going on. So she joins us.
I think for me, what I want to hear from you all is how to really make meaningful links. You know, I always think about in the 40s to the 50s, young Africans who were mobilizing, organizing, as some were frontline leaders, others were in the media. They all came together to achieve an objective. We are in 2020. The internet makes us be on the call together. Yeah. Beyond what people are listening to, you know, you in Accra, I know you say you're in New York, but you know, you have ties directly in Cameroon. What can we do meaningfully to really connect. And my proposition would be maybe we can co-write an article. Maybe we can cover one another's stories in our communities.
I'm sorry, guys. Apologies, but I'm here. I'm back. I hope you can all hear me. This thing happens. This thing happens. Okay, so let me go back to the question. I think you answered the question, but I just want to go further to dig into the responses that you get, Joe. You know, when it comes to issues such as trafficking in women and children, it's always very tough for people who are victims to relate the story, to talk about the experiences. What kind of responses have you gotten, especially with people who, you know, have experienced this trafficking, especially for children? I've seen a couple of videos that you've done. Was it easy to tell the story? Were they more open, knowing that, you know, as Africans, we try not to tell these stories because we don't want to get a bad name? Have you gotten any kind of?
I mean, first of all, there is like a certain level of attention to details when you are telling these stories, because these stories are super, super delicate. These are actual people who exist. These are actual human beings whose lives we are trying to capture and put out there. And then when in doing this, you just need to be able to tell, like, okay, I'm going to shoot this in probably like a documentary form with less fiction and more reality. And it hasn't really been easy, especially on the part of the people whose stories you are telling, because there is a thin line between your privilege coming in and then their reality. So trying to really blend all these two, it could really be difficult. But so far, the responses that have really come in, I really get excited when we are just making a film and then we wake up to an email saying, oh, okay, so I really needed to see this. And then usually it leads to like different conversations that people, you sit back and then it makes you really want to do more, basically.
So to reinforce what you said, Kambale, I think it's very important that we go back to the days of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, where Pan-African solidarity, and I don't think it was just Africans, Pan-African solidarity was really strong. I mean, you had Kwame Nkrumah, whose closest advisor was from, I think it was Trinidad. You know, we need to realize that there's no point in trying to decide people's identities or allocate identities to them based on, you know, the identity of the oppressor or the extent of oppression that they meted out to us. And I see that happening, you know, in some of the Black diaspora, because there's a lot of things on the continent that are happening, you know, that people don't know. Like Congo, it's a shame, you know, that Congo, for example, is going through all of this. Went through an interesting election, and many people don't know about it. I mean, on the one hand, it's good that all of Africa is rocking to each other's, you know, entertainment. We're watching each other's movies. You know, today someone's listening to Fali Pupa, or, you know. But beyond that, we also have to look at the issues that are bothering our country's governance. Because if governance remains poor, you won't have the space to dance. So I definitely think I saw a bit of that, you know, in the support of Africans for Namibia. Even during Fees Must Fall, you know, but I think we definitely need to have to amplify that on the level. I'm not an activist, but you know, I think it's important that journalists, intellectuals, policymakers, that we all try and recreate the date of Nkrumah and the whole, to an extent, Pan-African agenda, because it's important to shine a light on these things and pressure our governments, you know, to act.
In terms of, I'm sorry, I'm becoming like the moderator by Cameroon, because even though I may speak about Congo, but the situation in Amazonia is not known, right?
It's terrible. It's terrible in Amazonia. There's people in Cross River State, which is the part of Nigeria that readily borders Cameroon, and the situation in you know, those Anglophone regions are so bad. There's a part of Cameroon that the road is so bad there that people have to go into Nigeria to come back to another part of Cameroon. You know, that's how terrible it is. And so you have refugees all over Cross River State. And it's a very terrible situation. If they attempt to go back, they could lose their lives, or they could be arrested.
Thank you, guys. We have a few more minutes to go. I'm so sorry. I apologize. The internet has been very tricky today. So I did say that when we're done talking about our different spaces, we're going to talk about federal African space. Then I asked the question for our internet copy of Kambale. In all of the conversations we've had about Cameroon, about Ghana, about Congo, there's something that unifies us is we all have problems that are peculiar to our different spaces. But another thing that I have noticed is that our leaders seem to be paying deaf ears to what's happening in our countries and to people, knowing that our leaders' number one duty is to protect us and our communities. But take, for example, 6 million people are dead in Congo. Women and children are being trafficked in Ghana. So many Cameroonians in the Anglophone parts are running away from their home. Governments have not necessarily done anything to help the situation. For the likes of Cameroon, people are being shot at. I mean, Tito for Nigeria, people were protesting for good governance and they were being shot at. And today, the government is calling those same people terrorists. Is there some form of gang up of silence or a gang up of African leaders against the people who follow them? Should we start from there? Is it a leadership issue that we need to address for us to have the kind of Africa that we deserve? Kambale, did you hear my question? With you.
Yeah. I mean, in my opinion, it's not just an issue of leaders, right? It's an issue of the system. We have a capitalist system on the African continent that does not care about the well-beings of Africans, and that will do everything to make sure that resources and profits are extracted from Africans. And the way it appears is it uses neo-colonial agents, whom we call our leaders, to run these areas that have rich resources. I wouldn't be surprised, for example, for Cameroon, that in Amazonia, there are mineral resources in the area. I would not be surprised. And Wangari Maathai, before she died, the Kenyan Nobel Peace Prize winner, she always said that when we look at African issues, it's always about resources. In the Congo, it's the same case. In Nigeria, it's the same case, and we can continue to talk about many places. That to defeat it, what I've been proposing to every young African I speak to is to go back to the Manchester 1945 conference that took place with young Africans. Padmore was there, Nkrumah was there, W.E.B. Du Bois was there, and many others. And they set out an agenda for a united Africa. And in the resolution of the conference, they said that Africa needed to be free under the umbrella of socialism. And they explained it, what they meant by that scientific socialism. They say, we have wealth, we have land that belongs to us as a people. If we take control of our land and our resources, we exploit those resources for the benefit of the people, and we take the profit of those resources to build roads, hospitals, education, and so on, that will bring us somewhere. But we cannot get there if we are not united. That's why they fought for independence. So for me, the call for us, as we look at the leaders and how they operate, is because the people have forgotten that we have the power. When the people took charge and they mobilized for independence, they achieved it. Right now, we have neo-colonial agents all across the African continent. I mean, just last week, we had Western Sahara declaring war because we still have an African country under colonialism on the African continent, and that's Western Sahara. So people there are fighting for freedom. So when we unite against these neo-colonial agents, we have a fighting chance of changing our land.
Interesting. I'll come to you, Ayomo. You talked about the activism of the president in Cameroon. This is people for some other leaders across Africa who are leaders, but they're not leaders indeed. What do we do to make sure that we're more accountable? Because Kambale is saying that we need to have some form of agreement and move in the direction of socialism. But how do we even go about it when we're being shot at? When the man was supposed to be negotiating this has a gun under the table, how do we even start that conversation?
what immediately comes to mind is watching documentaries on the American war in Vietnam and seeing minefields everywhere. I think what young Africans need to do is to create a minefield, like pressure points across, because as Kambale rightly pointed out, right, governments are more interested in capitalism, in milking the states. Paul Paulet talks about the bottom billions, and one of the reasons he says that if a country will remain poor is the resource control trap, right? So as long as governments are interested in milking resource control, as long as they get money from that, there's no incentive. And I think that young people just need to create pressure points to ensure that the government remits the profits off of that is used to build strong institutions, to ensure development for other people on the continent. So that's my answer. Young people need to create a minefield. The way the NSAS protesters did, the way people are using social media, that needs to deep in and translate to grassroots advocacy. In the end, we just need to create a minefield, right? You step on this, something blows up in your face, and then they'll sit up.
Interesting. And Joaquin, the future, they say, is female, and women today have been objectified, they even objectify themselves, their priorities are different. But then in all of this, there are also women who are leading a charge saying, we don't want to be seen as objects, we want to be seen as leaders, we can change narratives, we can come to the table and we have something, to offer in leadership. And we see a lot of women coming, rising to positions of leadership. I mean, the NSAS protest, we saw the ladies who were, lawyers who were leading the charge. How do we educate those who still think that women should be in the back seats, which is also fueling this trafficking of women and children? How do we change that narrative? Aside from telling these stories, what do we do to, beyond that, build up the confidence of today's women and let her know her position, even though it had been a little bit in time past?
I mean, I just feel like as an ally of the movement, I feel there are times that you just need to take some steps back, and then all you need to do is amplify the voices of the real victims. All you need to do is listen to what they are saying, listen to what they are going through, and then what you need to do, you should be ready to learn. And unlearning and relearning. Unlearning is the most difficult part of really having to relearn, because we live in a society. We live in a patriarchal society. We are in a space where everything is you look around you, and then it's deeper than what is just happening now, because there are times that you really need to remind yourself, okay, you are not supposed to say these things, like, and your films might not just be enough. You need to extend the conversation beyond films to like where people are. People spend a lot of their times on their phones now. People are always on their phones now. Yeah, the film is like the new digital. Take the films to them on their phones. You don't really need to wait for the cinemas to open, or you don't really need to be in the cinemas to be able to propagate this thing, because we actually live with them. And if they say, we've been saying the future is female for a while now, and then the future is female for a while now, and this is the future. So I feel like if the future is really female, they should really be empowered in every single way as possible. And then the objectification of women is something that is way deeper than we actually think. There are times that you really, really need to remind yourself. You need to consciously remind yourself that this is so not right, because it's been so normalized. It's just part of it, the culture, the African culture. And then looking at what happened in Nigeria, the entire NSAS movement, I was super excited to see the feminist coalition, like being able to set up, gather around, like being able to like put things together, put everything together for it to happen. It happened right before our eyes, and I was super excited to see it happen before our eyes. We saw the revolution happen, and we saw the media houses being quiet on this, and this should tell you that the future will actually, the revolution will be hashtagged. I keep saying this, the revolution is here and will be hashtagged, and then it will be women leading this movement. And Nigerian women have been able to show this to all the whole of Africa, that the revolution is here. And the media houses were quiet. We won't forget that. The media houses were quiet. And it makes me wonder how much of our history have been lies, how much of our history have been dishonest to us growing up. We saw everything happen on the timeline. We saw everything happen with hashtag, but the media houses in Nigeria were out there like feeding people different things. And the thing is that
this is a whole conversation, so we will talk about.
We will talk about.
And I'm hoping, guys, you sent it. Yes, because the role of the media, plays going forward in the revolution that is breeding in Africa. The media needs to understand that this role is very pivotal. But I want to say thank you, guys. Thank you very much to Wakim Kusi, Eromo Egejue, and of course, Kampale Safuri. Thank you. This has been a great conversation, but it doesn't end here. I hear that we're going to do intercession, we're going to connect. But we have to keep this conversation going. We cannot just say, well, we had one, so that does it. We will keep having the conversation and sounding like a broken record until the message is taken home. Thank you so much, gentlemen. This has been a really great session. I mean, aside from the internet hiccups, thank you so much for being part of the conversation. So we're going to have question and answers, but I don't know where we're going to do that. I think we'll leave this stage.